Hey fellow babies, welcome back to the Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. Hey, I have a favor to ask of you guys out there, if you can grant us this favor. If you are watching on Patreon, you can tune out for the next 10 seconds. If you're watching on YouTube, I want to ask a favor, please. As you know, Shane runs SIFTD.net. He's supported by Patreon contributions. I insist that he puts this on YouTube for free because I don't want to force anybody behind a paywall if they want to watch Pachter Factor. But as a favor to me, please, would you consider click on the description of what you're seeing with Pachter Factor. There's an instruction and a tutorial. And if you are an Amazon Prime member, there's an instruction on how to link your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account. That's called Twitch Prime. Twitch will pay SIFTD $2.50 a month for your viewership, for your subscription. It costs you nothing. It's included in your Prime membership. So anybody out there who watches me on YouTube for free, thanks very much for your patronage. But if you link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and you subscribe to the SIFTD Twitch channel, then Twitch will pay for the Pachter Factor. Shane can afford to keep eating top ramen directly out of the box because he can't even afford his water bill anymore. So today's first question comes from Patreon from Julian Watkins. Hey Pachterino, it's actually Pachterini because that's for the plural of Pachterino. Seems like multiplayer was a huge focus at this year's E3 for franchises and developers that have traditionally been more single-player focused. What's your take on games like Fallout 76 basically going completely online and multiplayer? Fallout has always been a single-player game. Bethesda made a pledge to keep producing single-player experiences just 1 year ago. Well, Bethesda's not giving up on single-player, so we're going to still have single-player experiences. They kind of leaked and announced Elder Scrolls 6. I'm pretty sure that's going to be single-player. The Wolfenstein Youngblood is a co-op, but it's essentially a single-player. You're not playing multiplayer. No, I actually think Fallout, the bulk of the game will probably be a main campaign, single-player campaign. I'm sure multiplayer is for building, trading, maybe going on group hunts against big bosses or something. But I mean, what I really think is that you guys, consumers, have voted with your wallets that you like multiplayer games better than single-player. And, notwithstanding that the best-selling game of all time, Grand Theft Auto 5, is single-player, it's been immensely popular, we think, because of GTA Online. So adding the online component is what made it super, super popular. So my bias is that Fallout 76 is going to be structured like that, where there's a single-player game with an online experience, the way GTA Online works. I'm sure it'll be better integrated into the game. But I think you're going to get plenty of content drops and they're going to expand the universe and stuff. Frankly, I think that, with Elder Scrolls Online, which was not a super popular game, but was a good multiplayer experience, I think Bethesda figured out that, multiplayer is actually a thing. And in fairness, again, my favorite studio, so it's impossible for me to ever criticize anything that they do. But, they're easily 12 years late to the party, with multiplayer. It's taken them forever to figure out that this is something gamers want. And, the guys like me, we're a dying breed that love single-player games. I think Activision told me back in 2012 or something that 25% of Call of Duty players play the single-player campaign and 75% don't even bother, don't even try it. So if 3 out of 4 Call of Duty players don't even bother with single player, then 3 out of 4 people clearly prefer multiplayer. And if that's the case, why would you make a game for 25% of the audience? Why not make a game for either 75% or 100% of the audience? And I think that's what Bethesda's doing. I think that they understand that they need to do it. The reason I think it took until 2018 to figure out is because it's not easy to do. And if you kind of remember back in the days of like Battlefield, Bad Company or Battlefield 4, people complained a lot, about the multiplayer, and it just was wonky and there were issues with it. It takes years to get good at it. I don't think anybody complained about Call of Duty in 2005 or 6 or whatever, but they weren't really big selling games until '07, and then suddenly they figured it out. And that was the Infinity Ward guys, with Vince Zampella. They figured out multiplayer and they got it right. Treyarch took it to a new level, so multiplayer takes years to develop. I don't expect Fallout 76 to be flawless. I'm sure that there will be many, many glitches. But the answer is, I think that 25% of you out there like single player games, 75% like multiplayer. Fallout is probably going to give us both. And so I'll play single player until I level up to some ridiculous level. Then I'll go into multiplayer and mop up the landscape with you guys because I'll kick your ass and you can't wait. Next question from Patreon from Ben James Hodges. That's a great name. In recent years, a few games have been announced for release within a few months of being debuted at E3. In Microsoft's case, it's been exactly the opposite, as it announces games several years before they ever hit store shelves. Would publishers and Microsoft in particular benefit from only announcing games close to release? Would shareholders get nervous? On the shareholder side, Microsoft shareholders largely don't even know they're in the games business. I mean, the games business is a profitable business for them, but making software, game software is just not, it's a rounding error at Microsoft. They care about the software, about the hardware and about the online multiplayer stuff, the Xbox Live. So, and they care about the royalty stream from third-party games. The royalty stream from third-party games on Xbox is probably 90% of software revenue. 10% is their first-party games. So shareholders don't give a shit at all. I mean, that nobody cares. On other publishers, shareholders care a lot. What about Last Guardian? Remember that one? How many years did that take? What about Death Stranding? Oh yeah, only Microsoft announces games several years before release. What about Final Fantasy, fill in the blank on the number? No, Sony, I mean, there's probably 13 or 15 more Sony games. Sony is notorious for announcing games 5, 6, 7 years before. What about Agent? Do you remember that? 2009 E3. Look it up. As far as I know, still in development at Take-Two. So no, it's not a Microsoft thing. It's a console manufacturer problem. They love to leak out all the great games that they're working on. I made a joke on Twitter at the Microsoft press conference saying that Crackdown was Microsoft's version of Last Guardian. They announce it every year, and you don't believe it's actually ever going to come out. And Shannon Loftus, who's kind of head of internal stuff, she dissed me. She's like, "Wait, it's coming out. We gave a date." Yeah. After 5 consecutive E3s of talking about Crackdown 3. Yeah, and that's what Last Guardian was. I think there was 5 consecutive E3s that they showed that damn feathered dragon thing, whatever, that bird dragon thing, cat. What was it, a cat with bird feathers? I don't know what it was, a giant thing. Yeah, it was like, but it was the Guardian. But it was like, 5 consecutive E3s. Then finally, when they put a date on, we're like, nah, not really coming. So it's, the console guys always do that. The better question, I think, is, publishers, they all have different styles. So, there are publishers like Activision who don't really announce a lot ahead of time. And, like Call of Duty, officially gets announced typically each year, like February. They don't act like, I think Black Ops 4 with 4 sticks, as I recall, that was like February. It might have been a little earlier. They announce it in February, then they have an event in May, and then the game comes out in November. So is there ever a secret, like, do we actually not know Call of Duty's coming? Well, it's, Treyarch's turn. So of course it's going to be their game this year. We know it because they're so dependable. Call of Duty comes out every year. They rotate the 3 studios. It's a Sledgehammer game, an Infinity Ward game, a Treyarch game. So we don't really need an announcement because we just expect it. Do they need to announce FIFA? No. EA does not need to announce FIFA. We know it's coming out. Where you get a surprise is when something like Battlefield goes from every 3rd year to every other year. When Battlefield 1 came out, we all thought in 2016 the next Battlefield would be 2019. We were surprised when it came out in 2018. And they announced that, at an earnings call. Like, we have a Battlefield game coming out next year. So some guys are good at surprising you. Ubisoft isn't particularly good about letting you know what's coming, so we never know the plan for Assassin's Creed. It was every year from like 08 or something to 2015. Then they took an extra year, and Origins came out in 2017, and they announced it. They said, look, we're not doing it every year. in 2015. Syndicate came out, it did poorly. We're not making an Assassin's Creed game next year. We've oversaturated the brand. We're taking 2 years. And then 17 comes out, and then in 18, Odyssey was a surprise. And it got announced at E3. It got leaked by, some French retailer who showed a freaking keychain with a Greek helmet, Greek, I don't know what you call them, gladiator, not they're called Roman or gladiators, whatever the Greek guy is, but a Greek fighter's helmet. And I was surprised. I'm like, and of course the games media picked it up and they go, "Ooh, that helmet's out there. They have a game coming in 2019. And I'm like, no, you idiots. Nobody's making collectible keychain items for a game coming out next year if the keychain's in a store now, you morons." So that was a true leak, but again, it surprised me. So there are some companies like that they bring stuff out sooner and it's a pleasant surprise. There are guys who come out with games every year, like Call of Duty or like sports, and NBA 2K, WWE. You're never surprised when they come out. Just Dance. And then there are the guys like Activision who are pretty dependable, I should say Blizzard, pretty dependable that, if you look at Blizzard from 2010 to the present, you had StarCraft come out in 2010, you had Diablo in 12, you had, I gotta remember which year, Heroes of the Storm, Hearthstone in 14, Heroes of the Storm in there somewhere, 13 or 15, I can't remember which year, Overwatch in 16, it was like boom, 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 plus a WoW expansion or a StarCraft expansion or a Diablo expansion kind of peppered in there. And it was like pretty much every year Blizzard comes out with something. So last year when they didn't in 17, that was actually a surprise. It was like, Blizzard didn't produce something? Like, they're just so freaking prolific that you just expect a game every year. Because people just love Blizzard and they love the concept of mobile, and they believe if Warcraft Mobile comes out, that could add $500 million to revenue. So again, the visibility thing that you asked about, shareholders get nervous when there's nothing announced. And that's kind of why Take-Two stock's been all over the place. And shareholders love these guys when they have visibility and they see it. And that's why UB and Activision stock kind of trade higher. EA's kind of in between. So that's the answer. What's the smartest way to do it? I think every game should be announced a year ahead of time. I think it's smart to let people start to get excited about it. Next question from Patreon from Jerry Gonzalez. With E3 2018 in the rear view mirror, have you noticed things winding down for this current generation? Interesting. With fewer new game announcements and a lot being announced for 2020 or later, is the current generation over for the most part? What do you see Microsoft and Sony doing to win the next generation? Does it involve VR, AR? I think that Microsoft said something really interesting at my investor meeting with them. I actually asked them the question, have you just given up? Are you resigned to finishing second and that's it? And let's just move on. And they said, we hate being second, we want to win. Well, clearly they're not winning this generation. There's no chance. So that was a very strong signal, I think, that they will launch first. And whether you think they won the Xbox 360, PS3 cycle or tied, they were definitely much better competitively than they were in this cycle. This cycle their sales are probably 50% of PlayStation sales. In that cycle they were equal, and they were ahead for most of the generation. I think Microsoft recognizes that they need to launch first, and I think they recognize they need to launch cheaply. And so my bias is the next console from them is going to look an awful lot like an inexpensive PC. I think it's going to be, probably the size too. It's going to be small, it's going to be light, it's going to plug in kind of wirelessly, probably Bluetooth. You're probably not going to need to do anything, maybe an HDMI cord. But it's going to be really simple and really cheap and 4K. And I think that the Xbox One X is just kind of the prototype for the Xbox 2 or whatever they call it. I think that's coming sooner rather than later. I think 2019 might be too early because of the Xbox One X coming at the end of 17, but I think 19 is possible. And I think 20 is certain. So between 2019 and 2020, I think you're getting an Xbox. And I think the next Xbox is going to be in it to win it. I would say starting price $299. I think that they're going to make something that cheap. I think they're going to come up with a lot of reasons to own it. My guess is they'll have their Game Pass program, and it'll probably be 6 months free if you buy an Xbox. There's something to get you hooked, and they can do that. I mean, they can absolutely do that. And if they give you 6 months free and let you play their library, I think the next generation is going to have every game in this current generation that's made by Microsoft, backward compatible, downloadable, free as part of Xbox Game Pass. So I think they're going to say, buy an Xbox 2 and you get to play, Halo, Master Chief Collection, Forza, Gears, everything we made in the prior cycle. And that's a pretty compelling value, and they're going to sell a shit ton out of the box. Now, in fairness, Sony's talking the same game. I mean, I don't think they're going to launch first. Sony is so far ahead in this cycle, they're pretty comfortable continuing to make a ton of money on every PS4. That thing still hasn't been discounted. It's still $300. They got to be making $120 a piece on those, maybe $150. So they're making so much money on hardware. Their online PlayStation Network is working. Their ancillary services, PS Now, PS View, are starting to work. I think they want to milk this for a while. I think they correctly assess a PlayStation owner as being loyal. So I think Sony wants to exploit that. They want to give their PlayStation 4 installed base tremendous value and then keep them loyal by giving them more and more and more. So frankly, I think both companies have a very consumer-friendly approach and outlook. I think the winner is you. You're going to get a ton of value for not very much money. I think it's a race to giving the consumer value. The race is going to be won by the company that consumers embrace, the most fondly, and Sony's relying on its brand and its goodwill that it's generated since 2013. Microsoft is going to count on offering compelling value. We'll see, but I actually think that both guys are going to be out to win. VR AR is tough because it requires special equipment. VR largely doesn't work because it's expensive, not because it's technologically, unworkable. It works, but it's just too hard. It's like, all of them are great. Oculus is really, really great, but it's tethered. You have a wire. You need a fast PC. It's just like, why? I bought myself an Alienware PC with 2 graphics cards just so I could play Oculus. Like and I got it configured so it will actually work, and I have a graphics card for each eye, and it's set up, and I still haven't purchased Oculus because I can't think of anything I really want to do. But I bought a desktop PC. I spent, I think on the actual hardware about $1,400. So I spent a lot, but that $1,400 is essentially a $500 PC and $900 worth of 2 graphics cards, because I read an article in Ars Technica or something about why 2 graphics cards are better than 1, and I think I got it set up, but I haven't even bought the Oculus yet because, again, there's no software, and the poor software guys are like, well, I don't want to make software if there's no hardware, and we consumers are like, I'm not buying the hardware until there's software. So it's a really hard problem. When it becomes untethered and comfortable and easy, so that you can play it wirelessly and just pop your headset on anywhere. And if I could do it on my couch downstairs with this PC as the processor and all Bluetooth wireless, oh my God, I would do that in a heartbeat. So I think that's coming, but I don't think Microsoft and Sony are going to rely upon that to sell consoles. Sony obviously is pretty far ahead of Microsoft on VR with PlayStation VR. Still needs to be untethered. I mean, I think the last announcement was 2 million of those, which is a lot, but not enough to turn into a business. You need 20 million or 50 million to really make a business. So no, and then AR, Microsoft's kind of quietly stopped talking about, what the hell was that
HoloLens.
thing? Yeah, HoloLens. I mean, they still have it and they're still working on it, but I invited Kudo Tsunoda, who is like Microsoft corporate VP of HoloLens, to my E3 party, and he didn't come to E3 because apparently he's moved on to doing something else. I'm not even sure. He hasn't left. I mean, I just think HoloLens got de-emphasized and they just don't talk about it. A couple of years ago, it was like the centerpiece of their booth and there were lines to see it. It's very cool, but I think technologically it's really hard to pull off. Like, it's got cameras everywhere and you can't put your hand in the middle or it screws up the image, and So again, AR is cool, but it's a technological challenge to present. VR is cool, but it's tethered and weird and expensive. These things aren't going to be part of a mass market console for this next generation, I don't think. Our last question from Patreon, from Jacques. Will the recent furrow over cross-play for games such as Fortnite hurt the prospects for Sony's next generation hardware? Nintendo and Microsoft have been on the offensive, but could it actually affect PlayStation in any way? I'm going to give the PlayStation team some credit, okay? They understand their customer pretty well. And so we can speculate all we want. But the truth is, if you've ever played multiplayer before Fortnite, if you ever played multiplayer, let's just say you were a Call of Duty player or you played FIFA Online or something, you played only with people who were on the same platform as you. So if you played on PC, you only played against PC players. If you played on Xbox, only Xbox, and PlayStation, only PlayStation. So why is Fortnite different? Well, the answer is because the Epic guys decided to build a game that allowed cross-platform play, and they set it up that way. And the reason that it became an issue is because Microsoft, who is pushing Xbox Anywhere through Windows 10, already has the structure, the infrastructure to allow cross-platform PC and Xbox. So they allow it, and Sony said, no, wait a minute. One of the reasons you buy a PlayStation is because you want to play multiplayer games with other PlayStation owners, and if we let you play and invite your Xbox friends, they won't buy a PlayStation. I totally get that. So it's a profit deal. Sony wants to sell consoles. I get that. If you buy a console, they have a concept called lifetime value. They look at you and they say, you're going to buy 11 pieces of software at, let's say $10 profit per software title for us. And so we're going to make $110 more from you. And if we let you play with an Xbox guy, we're not going to make $110 of profit. So the answer is no, it's not going to affect Sony in any way. And by the way, let's just accept that it's a really tiny possibility that I'm wrong, okay? It's going to affect Sony. As soon as Sony figures out that it's affecting them, they'll change the policy. So I'm going to stick with my response. It will not affect Sony in any way because if they see the potential to start losing sales, they'll change their policy. So watch Sony. If they never change this policy, it's not affecting them in any way. If they change the policy, it's not affecting them in any way because they changed. So the answer is they're adults, they're intelligent, they're great business people. They are not going to do something to screw up their sales. Sony positioned themselves this generation as pro-consumer, and Microsoft started out as anti-consumer. So that kind of speaks volumes. Microsoft needed to restore consumer confidence and kind of restore their consumer-friendly, brand, and they needed to say, hey, we love you guys, we'll do anything for you. So they're clearly backtracking from the old DRM stuff and saying, no, we're for the consumer, whatever's best, we'll allow cross-platform. Sony, on the other hand, is like, yeah, we were pro-consumer with the DRM stuff because it never was going to work in the first place, and you guys would have hated on us if we had done it, so we didn't do it. They're making a business decision here. You're not going to hate on us if we don't allow cross-platform play because there's not enough of you. It just doesn't matter. Yeah, there's 150 million people playing Fortnite, whatever, 100, 200, I don't give a shit. And maybe 20% of that gameplay is on consoles, so 40 million people on consoles. So let's just say 25 million on a PlayStation. How many of those guys are lusting to play cross-platform with Xbox? 2 million? Who cares? What are you going to do? Throw your PlayStation in the trash because you can't play cross-platform play? Great. You're not playing, the next Last of Us. Like, get over yourselves. Like, whatever. They made a business decision. And yes, it's fair to conclude it's not consumer friendly, but they're a business. It is a profit deal. So there's consumer friendly and there's consumer friendly. If they take something away from you, that's hostile. If they don't give it to you, that's not hostile. So to say, like DRM, when Microsoft launched that, or talked about it, didn't launch it, that was taking something away from you. You were always able to take your games to your friend's house. You were always able to trade your games in. And when they took that away, that's bad. Since when have you had cross-platform on console? Never. If it's not a takeaway, Sony is concluding they're being plenty consumer friendly. Don't worry about it. Thank you for joining us on the Pachter Factor. It's been a while since E3. Reminder, please, if you are watching on Patreon, we love you. Thank you for your patronage. If you're watching on YouTube, I know I'm asking a lot, but just look at the instructions on the YouTube description. Go to Twitch, link Twitch to your Prime account. It's not that hard, and you will be a Twitch Prime member and subscribe to the SIFTD channel. It costs nothing except about a minute of your time. So at our E3 party this year, I had 5 special scotches. And interestingly, we had different reactions to all of them. We poured Macallan Rare Cask, which is what's called a non-age statement scotch. And Macallan takes all of its different whiskeys, and believe it or not, they have like 40-year-old casks. But they took, I think, 0 to 30, and they blended them. So scotch is at different stages of development. Everything that goes into a Macallan cask is the same, so it's all made the same way. It's all the same whiskey, but it's just been in casks for different years, so different batches of the same exact stuff. And they blended it, and the rare cask, they went through the distillery and they tasted the casks that they thought were maturing the best, and they blended those into a single cask. It's very expensive, about $280 a bottle. We went through 5 bottles of that at my party, which is kind of crazy. We poured another non-age statement called Glenmorangie Signet. Same exact thing, Glenmorangie. Glenmorangie does the same thing. It's not as popular a brand as Macallan, so we didn't bust through all of that. We poured one that it was really interesting called Wemyss, Wemyss. It was a 29-year-old The Dunes whiskey, super light, like almost like Chardonnay colored, really, really light, or Cabernet Sauvignon Blanc. Quite tasty, 29. We had a Bruichladdich from 1991, which, interestingly, Mike Morheim came up to me and he said, "Did you guys get this for us?" And I went, well, "Yeah." Why? And he goes, "Blizzard was founded in 1991. So it was really cool, and he drank that. And then the last one, which I loved, I'm just going to recommend that if you can afford it, go buy a bottle. This is also a couple $100, but my God, was it good. Something called Dalmore King Alexander. Dalmore did the same thing, the non-age statement. I never had Dalmore before a year ago, and that's because Rod Ferguson from the Coalition, the Gears of War makers, he turned me on to it, told me it's his favorite whiskey. The Dalmore King Alexander. So the reason I'm giving you this little mini lecture, Bruichladdich is a pretty famous one. I poured the Black Art. That was that black bottle that said, "If we tell you how we make it, we'll kill you." But Bruichladdich is a great Scotch maker. They tend to make peaty flavored scotches. Wemyss is a special one. You don't see it ever. But Dalmore is affordable. It's like $50 a bottle. It's very, very good. They have a Scotch called the Cigar Malt, which I haven't had yet, but also non-age statement, but apparently made for smoking cigars. Rod also told me about that one, so I'm going to pour that at my next Scotch dinner. My next Scotch dinner, I'm doing all non-age statement whiskeys. So I actually could tell you what I'm pouring. Here they are. So I'm going to give you a list, and the reason I'm telling you all this, is because this is a new thing in whiskey making, where normally they will age Scotch between 10 and 12 years, and so the first express, and some guys do 8, but most are 10 to 12. Almost everything you drink is 12 years old if you drink single malt. That's kind of the norm, and I don't know if I ever told you this. Did I tell you how Scotch got aged in the first place?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's the old barrels that went from Scotland to the Orient. But 12 seems to be kind of the year. And anyway, what happened is that Suntory, who makes a Scotch called Hibiki, they ran out of 12. So they had Hibiki 12, 17, 21. They ran out of 12 because the Chinese started buying it up. So Suntory figured out, well, we have all this stuff that we put away longer than 12 years ago for the 17 and for the 21. And we have all this new stuff that we put away to make 12 years old that's not 12 years old yet. What if we just blend it all together? So they did that first, and they came up with Suntory Harmony, blending all the different ones. It's phenomenal, 60 bucks. Dalmore Cigar Mall's 130. I'm pouring something called Glenmorangie Astar, which is a cheaper version of Signet, 99. Highland Park Valkyrie, 89. These are all non-age statement. Ardbeg Core of Reckon for 70. Aberlour Abunad for 69. Oshantoshan 3-wood, I highly recommend, 57. Oshantoshan Bartender's Malt, 45 bucks. It's phenomenal. That's lowlands, by the way. Everything's highlands. This is lowlands. There's hardly anybody that way. Lafroig Triple Wood, I've talked about before. It's finished in 3 different wood barrels. It's unbelievable. Something called Long Row Campbelltown, 55. Glenmorangie Spios, that's all finished in bourbon barrels, non-age statement, phenomenal. And then a new one I've never heard of called Glenlivet Code. Glenlivet is one of the cheapest whiskeys you can buy that's really good. It's usually $21 or $22. That's $110, and it's supposed to be phenomenal. So those are all non-age statement. I encourage you to try those. There are people who are snobs, and they're like, no, I will only drink Macallan 18. The 12 isn't good enough for me. Yes, you can tell. The longer it's in the bottle, you can tell. The cool thing about these non-age statements is because of the way they're made, they end up having some 30-year-old whiskey in there and some 26-year-old whiskey and 19 and 17. They actually blend out super, super smooth. So I encourage you to try a non-age statement whiskey because they tend to be smoother than even the 18s.